to Mr. Bax's cross-examination of Mr. Robertson. Does anyone have any preliminary matters or issues that they wish to raise? Nope. Okay, in that case, over to you, Mr. Bax.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your presentation yesterday, Mr. Robertson. I just had a couple of points on that. The visualizations that you brought up, what, after how many years would that actually have been effective? I mean, that demonstrates something that wouldn't be initially the case. A lot of mature trees on the route there. Presumably that would be, what, 15, 30 years after the opening?
Yes, the visualisation that we watched yesterday, the planting that was depicted in that visualisation shows the situation once the planting has matured, which I believe is 15 years after.
Is it 15 years or 30 years?
15 years after after construction.
Coming to the Sheargrass quarry, I think I refer to paragraphs 3 through spot 37 of your full recognition. 3.33 to 3.37.
Yes.
You say correctly that this has been a concern of the community for years, and you suggest that the provision of a left-in, left-out grade access was in response to the community's concerns. But it was slightly more complicated than that, I think, was it not? Would you agree that, in fact, Transport Scotland did have an obligation to provide an alternative access to the A9 after it stopped up, or would have stopped up, the emergency direct access which exists for Sheargrass at the moment?
Yes, there's within that length of the A9, there is a number of considerations with regard to access, accessing the trunk road. There's the quarry, there is the property at Glackmore, there's also the Shearglass estate, and to the north of the Shearglass estate there is land that is owned by Athol Estates, all of which currently takes access to the A9 via a number of existing direct accesses onto the single carriageway. And this particular length of the carriageway is an example of implementation of the access strategy that was developed, and through consultation with all the landowners along that length of the A9, we identified a preferred access solution. And one of the key things to point out is that we joined a number of existing access routes into a single access, which joins the E9, or the proposed E9 dual carriageway, in proximity to Shearglass Quarry. So yes, the quarry is one entity that benefits from that access. There is a number of other properties, and landowners who also benefit from that access.
Yes, so that's what we understand. In fact, that was in to conform with what you discussed with the police earlier, I think, in the TS 420 spot 1, that you would be rationalising the number of points.
Yes, yes.
Because Shearglass, Glackmore and the other ones already had direct access, then you really had to provide a replacement, but it helped to consolidate all those.
Yes, we've joined a number of existing isolated accesses onto the E9 into a single access point in proximity to Shearglass, and that access has been designed in accordance with the DMRB to ensure that it's a safe access point onto the proposed dual carriageway.
So, in that case, there would have been, whatever the community had said, in fact, it made sense to provide that access. It wasn't. You can't really imply from that it was the community had a sort of casting vote, so to speak, on that.
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't think the benefit to the community should just be automatically discounted, because it does result in a benefit to the community and a number of other properties, landowners within that general area.
No, absolutely. And will the access route that the quarry has through the village now be cut off, or will that still be retained? I see there's access provided through to the suds basins.
Yes.
Does that imply that the quarry would still, if it so desired, still have lorry movements through the village?
The access that's provided to the south east of the quarry is to provide access to the suds features, and it's also to allow the quarry to access a monitoring location, which is located between the A9 and the River Garry, so on the north side of the existing trunk road. So, even with the direct access, they would still. Lorries could still be directed through the village. The proposed access to the suds features is a 3.5 metre wide access track, so it's of reduced width. When we were considering this, we considered it would be appropriate for smaller vehicles associated with the quarry that could travel down that access track underneath the Essingall Underbridge, along the existing access track, which ultimately leads up to the Garry Bank property, in order that they could continue to access a water monitoring point before one of the minor watercourses outfalls into the River Garry.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to turn back to the consideration of lay-bys, which I know you did describe at some length yesterday, and referring to paragraphs 7.13 to 7 of your full precognition.
Yes.
We accept the siting of lay-bys was not done until stage 3, and that's in line with the fact that we didn't, as a community, see the lay-bys on drawings until November 2016. That would be correct?
That is correct. The two lay-bys that are proposed between the Altgarnaig Underbridge and the Altcloon Underbridge, the northbound lay-by at that location, that was introduced at DMRB Stage 3 in response to us considering the length between successive lay-bys being in excess of the 2.5 kilometre recommendation in the DMRB. The southbound lay-by in that particular stretch, as the DMRB Stage 2 report reports, that the southbound lay-by was considered at Stage 2, but it was only considered in conjunction with junction option A, which was the limited movement junction with the slip roads facing the Perth direction. The reason why that lay-by was included at Stage 2 is it was effectively the position or the distance between the end of the slip road associated with the grade separated junction and the start of the entry taper into the lay-by it was in excess of 1 kilometre with junction option A, but for junction option B, it was less than 1 kilometre, which would have constituted a departure from standard. And at that point, at stage 2, the lay-by locations that were considered were only those which didn't exhibit departures from standard.
I take your point on that, and I take the point that there is, I think the technical expression is that lay-bys were considered but not assessed. Is that not right at DMRB stage 2? And so it appeared to us that it does contradict the information that was given to the working group as shown in TS 160.22 on the 26th of October 2017. I don't know if we can get that up. TS 160.22. Page 11 on the PDF. I quote the section relevant, the consideration of lay-by locations. Sorry. Where is it? Is that page 11 we have there?
I have 160.9 at page 11. Ah. 110, someone suggesting. Page 110.
Or is it 111? 111. Oh, what is it? No, it's the section on demolition of outdoor neighbours.
It's further down. Sorry, it's a section on the demolition of the underbridges. Keep going. Yes, here.
No, cover. Yes, just lift it up.
Yes, there we are. Sorry. As stated in the previous response, the inclusion of lay-bys was considered during DMIB Stage 2. However, they're not assessed at the DMIB Stage 2 route option assessment, so not appealed to route choice. Consideration of lay-by locations at DMIB Stage 2 identified that section of the North Bank carriageway in the vicinity of the Orkneyga waterpool crossing as a potential opportunity to site a lay-by.
Yes, that is correct. I'm noting it as it was a potential opportunity. However, as I said earlier on, at stage 2, the laybys that were included in the design were only those that did not exhibit departures from standard. The proposed lay-by location in the northbound carriageway, just beyond the Altgrenade underbridge, would exhibit departures from standard, and it was only when we went back at stage 3 and looked at things in even closer detail, and having identified that there was this excessive length of carriageway without a lay-by, that we identified. And at that point we looked at the departures that would be present and considered how the effects of those departures could be mitigated, and then ultimately satisfied ourselves that a layout could be developed that was safe. But at stage 2, the stage 2 report notes at several locations that there was indeed laybys at certain locations within the scheme. However, just not at this particular northbound location in proximity to field F9.
Would you agree with our assessment, though, that the consideration did influence the decision on how to treat the Killiecrankie underbridge, and therefore the associated cost repercussions, and ultimately, therefore, the decision on route options?
No, as Mrs. McMillan said yesterday, the designs that were considered at DMRB Stage 2 exhibited 295 metres forward visibility throughout, and therefore, as there was no lay-by included in the design at Stage 2 for either northbound or southbound widening, that wasn't an influencing factor on the decision to widen to northbound or southbound at that particular location.
In 7.57, your full recognition, you do say that the existing lay-by at number 43, which is on the existing dual stretch, is approximately 1.9 kilometres to the southeast of the proposed lay-by in Killiecrankie. Are you arguing that it's crucial to have an additional lay-by at this point for driver safety, given 1.9 kilometre distances? Seems to us to be only a very short distance.
What the inclusion of the southbound lay-by within this stretch does is it reduces the distance to the previous lay-by within the proposed scheme, which is located beyond the Essingall underbridge, beyond the left-in, left-out access to Garry Bank. So I acknowledge that the distance between the proposed lay-by in the southbound direction and existing lay-by 43 is less than 2.5 kilometres. But if we hadn't have provided this lay-by on the southbound carriageway, the distance between successive laybys would have been in excess of 2.5 kilometres. And in providing the lay-by at approximate change 2,500, it is also, there is an existing lay-by also in this section just beyond the Alcloon underbridge. So effectively this is relocating the existing lay-by, which is located just beyond the Alcloon lay-by, which is lay-by 45, as referred to in the images that you prepared and submitted. The reason that lay-by can't be retained is its close proximity to the end of the merge taper of the proposed grade separated junction at Alcloon.
I just wonder, though, in your professional opinion, are you convinced that this additional lay-by, if I can call it that, or replacement lay-by, given the close proximity of only 1.9 kilometres to the existing one, is that really going to make a huge difference to driver safety, given that there are plenty of examples where there is a deviation from the 2.5 kilometre standard, and even on some stretches of motorways, for example, you often see signs saying no hard shoulder for 5 miles or whatever it happens to be. I'm just still slightly surprised that we're insisting on the need for a lay-by, particularly on the southbound. I think the point would also be true for the northbound lay-by, that there could be provision for warning drivers of except space longer than usual space between lay-bys.
I would reiterate what I said previously, that if the existing lay-by wasn't provided, the distance would be 7.5 kilometres, which is three times the recommended spacing within the DMRB. That particular length of carriageway is generally flat and straight, so with regard to siting of lay-bys, the various requirements from geometric perspective, it is a better location than others. And I would reiterate what I said yesterday with regard to the grade separated junction, that the argument that has been said previously is that a grade separated junction would offer an opportunity for tired drivers to leave the carriageway. I would say that the inclusion of a lay-by to the Type A standard, which includes the segregated island, and which introduces the separation between the dual carriageway and the parking lane, offers a safer location, rather, particularly for a driver who has identified a technical fault with their vehicle, to pull over into the lay-by and take the necessary action to address the fault. The grade separated junction, whilst being a slip road with a hard shoulder, there still isn't that level of separation from the main flow of traffic that a Type A lay-by would introduce.
No, I think we all understand the safety reasons for lay-bys, and we wouldn't dispute that they're necessary in the project overall. What we're trying to get at is whether there was any sensitivity with regards to putting the lay-bys on the Killiecrankie battlefield. And I just wonder whether Mr. Dempsey actually came to you at any point in the process, and perhaps to explain the problems that HES in particular had with additional earthworks and the repercussions of putting lay-bys on the battlefield, which would automatically increase the amount of earthworks required and the damage done to the battlefield.
Yep. As part of the Stage 3 design development, it is an iterative design development. Throughout the Stage 3 process, we have regular hold points where we discuss the design at that point in time with all the specialists who are involved, including environmental specialists, who feed back commentary to us, and which we take into consideration in the further development of the scheme. However, in this particular location, and with regard to lay-bys, the safety benefits of including lay-bys and commentary that was received from Police Scotland, which note the benefits of regularly spaced lay-bys from a perspective of addressing driver fatigue, which they noted as being a particular issue along the A9 corridor. That overriding addressing safety concerns ultimately led to the inclusion of lay-bys within this length of the carriageway.
And if Mr. Dempsey, for instance, had come forward and said we can't put lay-bys on the battlefield, what would be the alternative? Would there?
I mean, like everything else, it is a process of balancing the various needs. So we would have again taken what Mr. Dempsey has to say into consideration in the round with other commentary received and consultation, with various parties, and including Police Scotland, as it is associated with a road safety matter. and then ultimately made a decision as to whether we include laybys or not.
And as you said, I think discussion would have taken place at stage 3, so it's after the route alignment been decided effectively.
Yes.
That conversation would have taken place with your colleagues.
Yes. I mean, stage 2 and stage 3 is an iterative design development where, at various points through design development, we introduce hold points where the specialist teams assess the design and feedback to myself as the highways designer, and then we then discuss that and move forward to develop the design further.
Jacobs announced at a presentation given to the community in June 2017 that there would be no enhanced laybys at Killiecrankie following, I quote, a more detailed review at DMRB Stage 3. For reference, that's the leaflet TS 160 spot 17. Would you agree, in the light of what you've been saying about laybys, that actually this was a bit misleading, that enhanced laybys had never been considered at DMRB Stage 3, because they'd already been rejected previously?
Yes. It is a fact that, as the enhanced lay-by strategy reports, there was at an early stage the location which is within the existing dual carriageway section through the pass of Killiecrankie. There was a location identified for further consideration of an enhanced lay-by at that particular location. But as I said yesterday, that is in excess of 1 kilometre away from where the proposed northbound lay-by is, and approximately 1.6 kilometres away from where the southbound lay-by is proposed. So yes, if the presentation, the wording there, following a more detailed review at DMRB Stage 3, no enhanced lay-bys are proposed at Killiecrankie. That is correct. That statement, in referring to Killiecrankie, we're referring to the lay-by that is located, or the location that was identified in the enhanced lay-by strategy. And in fact, in the enhanced lay-by strategy, it was referred to, I think, as location 17, Killiecrankie. Yes.
I think my point is that it was presented to at that meeting as a concession to the community, but in fact, it was really no such thing because it had already been eliminated and was in a different place.
Yes. Yep. The lay-by that's proposed at Killiecrankie is a standard type A lay-by with no enhancements.
Yes, no, I understand that, but it was only subsequently, I think, that people realised that the footprint of the Type A lay-by and the enhanced lay-by were fundamentally similar. There was a small difference in the width, but the length is the same. And for all other intents and purposes, the footprint and amount of earthworks required is pretty similar.
The standard for a standard Type A lay-by, the segregation island, curb segregation island, is 1.8 metres wide. For an enhanced lay-bys, they were looking at increasing that separation up to approximately 4 metres to introduce an increased separation between the dual carriageway and the parking area and any further enhancements that were located beyond. But the actual layout of the part of the lay-by immediately next to the dual carriageway, that layout is driven by design standards and road safety. Any other examples of enhanced laybys, each site is typically different, and depends on what the enhanced lie-by is trying to achieve, whether it's a view from the road or link to adjacent NMU routes. But fundamentally, the layout immediately next to the dual carriageway is governed by the design standards.
Okay, thank you. Could you just clarify a statement that you made in 8.6 of your full precognition regarding the location of SUDs? I think you suggest that we had misunderstood something concerning the location of SUDs, and that they had never been moved from a previous location. But according to CD 011 PDF 05, Chapter 4, 4 spot 3 spot 21. I don't know if we can. CD 011 PDF 05 Chapter 4 4.3.21 4 spot 3 spot 21.
Is that in reference to the first bullet point?
It says, I quote, the SUDS feature at chain 1350 was moved from a previous location immediately to the north to avoid a loss of approximately 0.72 hectares of AWI. Sorry. So, is that information incorrect, or?
No, that information is correct. Could we possibly go to the development of the scheme report? Chapter 8, I think, is where we want to go. It's the drawing which shows the various locations that were considered during DMRB Stage 3. It may actually be Chapter 7, actually.
Can someone give me a document reference for that?
Sorry, this is TS 206.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we're looking at figure 6.5 here, which is it's an example of what I said earlier on, that during the DMRB Stage 3 design, it's an iterative design, and that figure there, with particular reference to the right-hand side of the Altgarneig, that demonstrates the various locations that were considered during the DMRB Stage 3 process, and through the iterative design process, speaking with my specialist colleagues in the environmental team, as more information became available about the surrounding area, the surrounding constraints, we were able to refine the design even at DMRB Stage 3 to ultimately arrive at the location that was included in the final Stage 3. So, with reference to the bullet point that we were looking at previously, and a previous location to the north, the design layout shown there in the black lines, that depicts a previous layout that was developed for SUDS Feature A in this location, and it's within an area of woodland that is located in close proximity to the eastern bank of the Altgarneig watercourse, and the purple the purple design, which is located within Skirmish Field 2, that was the final layout of the SUDS feature at stage 3. And you can see, whilst there is a purple design there, there's also a yellow design and a blue design. And as DMRB stage 3 developed, we ultimately moved and some very, very minor refinements to the design in the latter part of stage 3, and that is depicted by the various colours of design that is located within Skirmish Field 2, which was then subsequently refined in the refined design to enlarge that layout within Skirmish Field 2, with the effect of removing the SUDS feature B that's located in Field F9.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. My final point is just on coming back to earthworks again. You described the steepening of earthworks in the refined scheme as a routine amendment. But that's in 5.1 in your full precondition, 5.10, sorry, in your full precondition. Would it also be routine when such steepening means a removal of embedded landscape mitigation?
Well, I made this point yesterday, and I'll come back to it. That whilst we've refined the design and changed the earthwork slopes, we have been careful where these changes have been introduced. And if we could just look at the design development report again, TS 206, and in particular table 8.1. This table should highlight where changes have been introduced to the earthworks design and where the original graded out slopes have been retained. Yes, so as I said, table 8.1, at the southern end of the scheme between 1600 and 1900, there was no change to the earthworks. Similarly, at the northern end of this particular section between chainage 3020 and 3350, there was no change. Slopes were locally steepened between chainage 1900 and chainage 3020. And again, similar to DMRB Stage 3, when we were considering the refinements to the design, we consulted our colleagues in various disciplines, Mr. Lancaster, for example, on the landscape and visual aspects, and in particular the benefit, that graded out slopes introduced to various parts of the scheme. The prime example of that is within Field F9, where we have retained the existing slopes, and the existing graded out slopes have been retained because it was identified that the particular landform at that particular location was appropriate to integrate with a graded out slope.
So you wouldn't say that removing that embedded mitigation would change the balance in any way with the competing interests?
I would say we have changed the slopes at locations where it's considered that there is less of a requirement for, for example, for landscape and visual and fitting of the landform. But my colleague, Mr. Lancaster, he will be able to explain from a landscape and visual perspective anyway, why some lengths of the refined design were appropriate for steepening up the earthwork slopes and where other locations were not.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bucks. Mr. Campbell, do you have any questions?
Okay.
When you're working out a lay-by strategy for a scheme such as this, do you look at the whole scheme, or do you look at the scheme section by section?
For a lay-by strategy, we look at the existing laybys within a particular length, but also in neighbouring sections. In this case, we considered the laybys that are located within the existing dual carriageway section, and indeed, when looking at laybys, also the layby provision in the neighbouring scheme, the Pitlochry to Killiecrankie dualling scheme.
So your initial strategy formation would be, tell me if this is fair, dictated by the existing provision of laybys to start with. You'd be able to say, here are 6 laybys spaced across the length of the 6, 8, 10, whatever the number is, and then we can work to those to see if we need any more or
yes.
to enhance them.
Part of the consideration here was looking at, within between Killiecrankie to Glen Garry, how many existing laybys are there within that length, and how many can we achieve within the proposed scheme, taking into account the numerous constraints up and down the length of the carriageway.
What's the answer to the first question then, between Killiecrankie and Glen Garry? Bear with me, sorry. What's the answer to the first question? Between how many there are?
How many laybys?
Yes.
From memory, there was, I think there's approximately 11 laybys.
And what's the length of that section?
It's 21.6 kilometres.
And that's 11 both northbound and southbound?
Yes.
Okay. The advice is to provide a Type A lay-by, if I understand it correctly, the advice is to provide a Type A lay-by every 2.5 kilometres or thereby.
Yes, that's a recommendation.
That's a recommendation.
From the DMRB.
Now, the DMRB is at CD 401/13. You don't need to turn it up. But it recommends that figure, 2.5 kilometres.
Yes.
By reference to the design speed of the road.
Yes, whether it's a dual carriageway or a single carriageway.
Is it governed by the design speed of the road or the estimated traffic flow?
It is not governed by the traffic flow, as we discussed yesterday. Traffic flow is a factor for single carriageway roads, but not for dual carriageway roads.
Okay. Given the existing lay-by opposite Urrard House, that's to say on the northbound carriageway, do you know what I mean?
The one next to the Glen Garry underpass. Yes.
Correct. Yes.
Yep.
If one was to go southwards on the northbound carriageway, where is the next lay-by?
On the southbound carriageway.
It's a difficult question to ask by reference to direction. If you start with the lay-by opposite Urrard House next to Glen Garry.
Yes, on the northbound carriageway.
On the northbound carriageway.
Yes.
Southwards from that point, where is the next lay-by?
The next lay-by on the northbound carriageway is located to the south of the existing dual carriageway section through the pass of Killiecrankie. So it's in close proximity to where the proposed grade separated junction is to be located at Pitlochry North Junction.
Yeah, how far is that? I won't hold you to a mathematical certainty, but
well, I had included this in my precognition. So the lay-by that I was just referring to there is lay-by 41, and that is located approximately 3 kilometres southeast of the new lay-by at Killiecrankie. The new lay-by at Killiecrankie is located approximately 500 metres south of the existing lay-by. So between the two lay-bys, I would estimate that to be approximately 3.5 kilometres.
And is the lay-by, sorry, you gave it a number, was it 41?
The lay-by 41 is the lay-by that's located to the north of Pitlochry.
Yes. Which page are you on in your presentation?
Sorry, I'm on page 47 of my precognition, and that's at paragraph 7.56.
Yes, it's my fault. I was looking for this in the precognition and I didn't pick it up, but I see it now. And is that a Type A lay-by, or simply a parking bay?
The existing lay-by to the north of Pitlochry, where you join the existing dual carriageway. I don't know if it conforms exactly with the layout of a Type A lay-by, but from my understanding is that it exhibits some degree of separation between the.
Does it have a segregation barrier or not?
Yes, it has a segregation, whereas the lay-by next to Glen Garry
Does not.
Does not, and it conforms more to a Type B lay-by.
Yes, indeed. But the point I want to get to, the information I need is the one immediately to the south of, sorry, the one at the Pitlochry Junction is at least bears a passing resemblance to the Type A lay-by.
Yes, it includes some physical segregation between the main carriageway and the area in which a vehicle would park.
Okay. And that's in the form of an island or a curbed island, is it?
Yes.
Thank you. Were you to close the Glen Garry lay-by and not build the proposed Type A lay-by on the battlefield, what would be the distance northbound between existing lay-bys?
That is a distance of approximately 3.5 kilometres.
You understand the question?
Yes.
From the Pitlochry,
which is lay-by 41.
lay-by 41.
Which I've noted in the second bullet point of my precognition, that the distance between lay-by 41, which is located in proximity to the Pitlochry North Junction, and it's approximately 3 kilometres to the southeast of the new lay-by at Killiecrankie. The lay-by that you refer to in proximity to the Glen Garry underpass, that is located approximately 500 metres or so. So the combination of those two figures, 3.5 kilometres, or approximately 3.5 kilometres.
The question was, were you to close the Glen Garry lay-by and not build the proposed new lay-by on the battlefield, what would the distance be northbound between the Pitlochry Type A lay-by and the next lay-by going north?
Well, okay, sorry, if we were not to construct the lay-by at Chainage 1600 next to the Killiecrankie underbridge, and close the lay-by, close the lay-by at Glen Garry, the next lay-by in the northbound direction is it's on the bottom bullet point on page 47 of my precognition, which is a lay-by located approximately 5 kilometres to the northwest of the new lay-by at Killiecrankie, and that's a new lay-by promoted within the extents of the Killiecrankie to Glen Garry project. So 5 kilometres north of this location,
plus
and
3
kilometres, so it would be approximately
be about 8.
Approximately 8 kilometres. Yes.
Good. Well, I'm pleased that I've understood that, because it's not your fault, but it's no doubt my fault, but I couldn't quite get my hand on that figure.
But again, I would point out that lay-by 41, which is located in close proximity to the existing Pitlochry North Junction, that lay-by is to be closed as part of the Pitlochry to Killiecrankie project because of its proximity to the northbound merge of the Pitlochry North Junction. So with that lay-by being closed, that particular scheme is promoting a new lay-by at the southern end of that project, and it's that additional distance, effectively the length of the Pitlochry to Killiecrankie project, which brings you up to the 13 kilometres. 13 kilometres, yes.
So that's another 5.
Yeah, 5 kilometres, which is approximately the length of the Pitlochry to Killiecrankie.
So that's where the 13 figure comes from.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. I think I have that now. I hope the reporter does, but we can certainly put it into submissions if we need to. Thinking now about going southbound.
Yes.
And again, the starting point is opposite Arad House, because that's my particular interest.
Yes.
In this case. It's proposed to build a new type A lay-by on the southbound carriageway.
Yes.
Assuming dualling is on that side, on the battlefield. And that's to be a type A lay-by, is it?
A type A lay-by onto the southbound carriageway, yes.
Okay. Where is the next lay-by? First of all, looking northwards.
Yep.
In other words, driving south.
Yep. If I take you on to the next page, which is paragraph 7.57 of my precognition, I list out where the new lay-by is to be located, and where the existing lay-bys are located, and what the impact or what the effect of the dualling is on those lay-bys. So, with reference to the first bullet point, a lay-by located approximately 5.5 kilometres to the northwest of the new lay-by at Killiecrankie, and that's a new lay-by that's promoted within the extents of the Killiecrankie to Glen Garry project. And then there's a number in the following bullet points. There's a number of existing lay-bys, 48, 47, and 45, that due to the proposals with this proposed scheme, that those 3 lay-bys would be closed.
I can work through this myself.
Yep.
Thank you. Just for the purpose of the question, if you would indulge me, if we're looking north on the southbound carriageway,
yep,
how far is the next lay-by from the point at which you propose to construct a new lay-by?
5.5 kilometres.
5.5.
Yep.
And travelling southwards from that point, where is the next lay-by?
The next lay-by is approximately 1.9 kilometres to the southeast of the new lay-by.
1.9.
And that's noted in
the second last bullet point, is it?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I have that now.
So that gives you the 7.5 kilometres approximately between successive lay-bys that would be present if we didn't provide a lay-by within this section. Again, three times greater.
3 times.
Three times greater the recommendation within TD 69 of the DMRB.
Are there rules for applying latitude to the DMRB? Apart from the obvious rules about topography and the geology and so forth.
But as that the particular part of the DMRB, it's a recommendation for spacing. So there would be no need to apply for a departure from standard, for example, if you didn't provide the 2.5 kilometre spacing.
Well, I understand that. But how do you go about that if you want to depart from the DMRB recommendation?
If you want to depart from a recommendation, you don't need to depart from a recommendation. There's certain parts of the DMRB which are requirements, which would require, if you were to depart from those parts of the DMRB, as designers, we would do a thorough check of the design to ensure that we were content with the part of the design that departs from standard. We would then discuss that part of the design with a completely independent part of Transport Scotland, which is the standards branch, who look at the part of the design that departs, and then ultimately they would decide whether they accept the departure from standard or not.
Okay, thank you. If I could take you now, moving away from laybys finally. Oh no, one more question, sorry about them. The police advice is presumably general, in that obviously the police are interested in road safety.
Yes.
Police advice is not pinned to the DMRB, is it? It's just simply advice to you to have safety in mind.
Yeah, yes, it was commentary that we received at the meeting, and I would say that applied to the A9 dualling as a whole, and that driver fatigue on the A9 corridor as a whole was a concern that they had experience of this particular issue along the corridor as a whole.
Yeah. Okay, let's move back to your precognition. Could you find page 20, paragraph 5.12? You say there, from inspection, it is apparent that the existing bund that extends along the rear of the northbound verge extends up to a maximum height of approximately 1.6 metres, and the height of the bund is not uniform over its length. The replacement, then at 5.13, the replacement bund in the Stage 3 design replicated the height of the existing bund. 5.14, the natural stone wall that is proposed in the RD also replicates the height of the existing bund at its tallest point. What I'd like to ask you, Mr. Robertson, is the parameter set for the new stone wall simply drawn from the height of the existing bund, in a sense replacing like for like?
Yes, the height of the wall acknowledges the fact that the existing bund at its tallest point is approximately 1.6 metres, and we, in developing this refinement to the design, we also consulted with my colleagues in the landscape and visual specialists, and also the noise specialists.
I was coming to that, but thank you. But the 1.6, the original parameter is the same as the height of the bund.
Yes, the starting point was to provide a wall that that replicated the height of the existing bund.
Now, in recommending that height, you say you've consulted with presumably Dr. Palmer,
yes,
who is the noise specialist in this case.
Yes.
Have you, as a designer, managed to ascertain any comparison between the noise attenuation qualities of the bund and the predicted noise attenuation qualities of the proposed stone wall?
I would refer that question to my colleague who can explain the differences between a noise bund and a wall with regard to noise.
Perhaps the answer to my question is no, not me, but somebody else has done it.
Yes, it was considered and taken into account in development of an alternative to providing the bund in the proposed scheme.
You see, it might hypothetically be the case that a proposed wall of 1.6 metres has a certain noise attenuation quality, but a wall of 1.8 metres, for example, again, hypothetically, has better noise attenuation qualities.
Yep.
And so I would be bound to ask you, why have you not gone up another 20 centimetres to achieve a better decibel reduction?
Well,
but if that's not a question for you, just tell me, and I'll park it.
David, my colleague, Dr. Palmer, will be able to explain concerns associated
if he's in the audience, he's got notice of the question. But there's no trick in this question. I just want to find out how the comparison was made.
Yep.
Moving on then, on the same topic, how was the decision taken as to the length of the proposed wall, which, in inverted commas, replaces the bund?
Could we have a look at figure D1? I think it is in the development of the scheme report. Might assist.
If you just bear with me then, please.
Explanation. Again, that's document
206.
206, yes. And in fact, if we could move on to the next page, which is figure D2.
Sorry, are we in Appendix D?
Yes, Appendix D of that document, and it's actually figure D2.
D2, just a moment, please. Okay, I have it. Thank you.
If we could actually zoom into the bottom viewport, which is the refined design.
Just pause a second. Sir, do you have that drawing?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. Cool.
Yep. I think if we look at the bottom viewport of that drawing, which considers the refined scheme, and even if we're able to zoom in just a little bit further, and if we start at chainage 1900 and work north, you can see just looking at that particular viewport at chainage 1900, the brown line that follows the back or is located within the verge of the entry taper of the lay-by, that extends just to beyond chainage 1900. So that's the 1 metre high natural stone wall that has been included in the refined design round the back of the lay-by.
I think that's for accuracy, that's the exit taper of that.
That is correct. That's the exit taper of that lay-by where it rejoins the main carriageway.
I can see where that stopped, but I'm not really in this question interested in that wall.
Yes, but it's just to complete the picture as we move north. As we move north and that wall ends at chainage 2000, for example, we are in a section of shallow cutting there,
yes.
And beyond the back of that shallow cutting, there is the orange area in there. That is the tree belt that runs along the back of the existing A9. So that area of orange is area of trees that are to be retained. The length of the carriageway that is in the shallow cut extends up to chainage 2100, yes. and at that point you see the commencement of the 1.6 metre high natural stone wall, and that then extends through to chainage approximately chainage 2375. To which point that's the commencement. That's the termination point of the wall, and beyond that point, it is the cross section would be an existing. Would be the standard verge with the existing embankment. I would also like to point out at that particular location. The areas, or the large area of trees, which is shown approximately as the green area surrounding the two ponds there, that is all area of existing trees that is located outside the extents of the CPO, and so therefore there is an extensive area of trees between, for example, the Steadings and House of Urard, Urard House, between those properties and the refined design.
Okay. You're explaining very carefully what I can see on the plan, and I'm grateful for that, but that wasn't quite my question. My question was what dictates the northern terminus of that wall, or what has dictated in design terms the northern terminus of the brown wall. That's about 2,000, I would say 2,300, change 2,370 or thereabouts.
Yes.
Well, it must stop there for a reason, yes. And I just want to know why.
The existing bund that's located along that length terminates in that approximate location, and also within that length, as I said, there is areas of existing planting outside the CPO, yeah, which also provides screening for the properties.
So would it be fair then to say that what dictates the terminus of that wall is the approximate terminus of the bunding?
Yes. And
is there any construction reason that you know of why that wall could not be extended perhaps to chainage 2,500 or 2,550?
From a purely construction
that was the question.
Perspective, there's no reason that it could be extended. In extending the wall, it would increase the footprint by requiring the wider verge to be extended further north. But purely from construction, there's no reason why that wall could be extended.
I obviously understand there's a cost involved, but we're not dealing with costs.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, you will see on the same drawing to which you've taken us,
yes,
the House of Urard in the middle bottom of the
yes
picture, and other buildings shaded yellow to the north.
The Steadings?
West, the Steadings.
Yes.
Was consideration given to improving noise attenuation for those buildings as part of the scheme?
Again, I would refer to my colleague, Dr. Palmer, who can explain the noise modelling, the noise levels that were reported at that location, and how that translated into there's no requirement for specific noise mitigation at that particular location.
I'm sure Dr. Palmer will explain. In fact, he'll need to explain this recognition because it's quite difficult to follow and technical. But my question was carefully put. It was whether any consideration was given to improving potential noise attenuation. The verb is improving noise attenuation for those houses. If you're not aware that it was, then just say so, and we can move on.
I'm not aware of a need to improve noise mitigation.
Or a suggestion that there might be improvement.
Yeah.
You're not aware of that. Something is made in your recognition, really between 511 and 516, of the benefit of tree planting. And this is a pretty obvious point that Mr. Baxter, I think, made already, that clearly with tree planting, we have to wait to see meaningful results.
Yes.
15 or 20 years.
Yes.
Is there any proposal alive to plant mature or semi-mature trees? In other words, to transplant, well, mature is the wrong word, to transplant semi-mature trees into any of these locations?
Yes, my understanding that at certain locations there, we are considering the exact specification of planting to introduce more mature tree planting at specific locations.
You have to keep your voice up. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Yes, my I'm aware that there is proposals to introduce more mature tree planting into the planting mix. Again, Mr. Lancaster can explain further exactly why that would be the case.
So you have just a general awareness of that?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Can I turn now to the protection of listed assets, and in particular the wall of the walled garden closest to the existing carriageway, which I think we can probably agree is potentially vulnerable to accident if for example, is hit by a stray JCB or something of that sort.
It's the CPO boundary is located in close proximity to the wall, particularly at its southeastern end.
Generally, can you help the reporter with your view of what the general condition of the wall is at present?
There has been no investigation, intrusive investigation.
No, my question was generally. I mean, casting a professional eye on it.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the wall, it looks to me to be in good condition.
How then would a protective mechanism operate, as is proposed? Sir, I'm at paragraph 6.7 of Mr. Robertson's recognition, just for your notes. The last sentence, last 5 lines. How would it work?
Well, what we have proposed and put to your clients previously is that we would introduce a safety barrier that would be located at the edge of the site boundary, which would further mark out the extents of the site and prevent vehicles striking the foot of the wall. We have also proposed that solid hoarding is included at this location, which would extend obviously above the height of a temporary safety barrier.
Okay. How does that work then? It's not just Harris fencing, is it? It's something more robust than that.
No. Because Harris fencing was proposed as mitigation within the ES, and we've considered that something probably more robust would be needed within that section, particularly over the short length at the southeastern end of the wall where it is in closest proximity to the wall. Yeah. I do note that at the northwestern end the site boundary extends up to approximately 11 metres. But
I understand that. Yeah. I'd just like you to. I can see what you say, and of course I understand it. It's just the reporter and I have an idea of what you are proposing. For example, does the solid hoarding that you described there, does that sit on concrete feet, or is it concreted into the ground? How is it secured to ensure that the listed asset isn't damaged?
Well, I wouldn't imagine it would be concreted, foundations into the ground. So I think it would have to be looked at, and the contractor would have to ensure that there would be that the safety barrier and the hoarding was suitably anchored in order that if a vehicle came into contact with it, that the barrier and the fencing performed the function that it was placed for.
Okay, so could we leave it that this is a contractor's responsibility, one which you haven't yourself designed yet?
We haven't designed the exact system up, but we've identified that the constituent parts of that would be a temporary safety barrier to protect the base of the wall, and also the solid hoarding fencing at a higher elevation to protect, the upper part of the wall.
Yeah.
What we have done is looked at the construction boundary and satisfied ourselves that there is sufficient room within the site boundary that these could be provided, and that the contractor would still be able to construct that embankment.
But in your instructions to the contractor, you will leave the method of carrying this out to him, will you? Subject to a general specification.
Yes, it's something that could be included within future contract documents.
Yeah, I want to know this because if there is an accident, and I'm sure you'll be as careful as you can be, and I'm sure you'll instruct the contractor to be as careful as he can be, but accidents happen. And I want to know this because if accidents do happen, then there's going to be a claim, and there'll probably be an issue about the cost of rebuilding whatever's damaged. So I just need to be clear whose responsibility it is, or will be rather, if the contract is let on this basis.
Yeah.
Can you help me with that?
Yes. Well, the requirement to construct or to implement these measures would be included in the contract documents, and it would be the responsibility of the contractor to ensure that that these were constructed, implemented, maintained, and then removed at an appropriate time following the construction.
All right, that's clear enough. Thank you very much. I think for my purpose. Sorry, sir, let me just have a second. Yes. Yep, that's everything. Thank you, Mr. Robertson. You've been most helpful. I'm grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Just one question from me, really, Mr. Robertson. Can you clarify for me what the running length or distance of the A9 through the inventory battlefield is?
Yes. If I could take us to the design development report, TS 206. Yes. If we could go to Appendix A. No, that's not the drawing. The inventory boundary commences within the existing dual carriageway to the north of Pitlochry, and it extends through to a point just to the northwest of the Essingall underbridge, which, bear with me. No. But it's a point just beyond the Essingall Bridge, which is approximately change 5,000. So within this scheme, it's approximately 5 kilometres. Then, as I said, it extends through the existing dual carriageway to a point just north of where the existing dual carriageway.
So for this scheme, it's approximately 5
yes,
kilometres.
Our scheme starts at change 700, which is where it ties into the existing dual carriageway, and from my understanding of the inventory battlefield, it extends across the Essingall Bridge and to a point between the Essingall Bridge and Sheerglass. It's in that general area where the northwestern boundary of the inventory battlefield is located.
Okay. I'm interested in having a fairly precise figure for that, or at least having some certainty around the approximately 5 kilometres distance. So, if it's not easily to hand, I'm happy perhaps for Mr. Milne to come back to me with a figure later once that's been looked at. And you're related to that and returning to the vexed issue of lay-bys. Yep. I just want to be clear that if all other things are equal and the proposals remain as they are, barring the removal of both lay-bys in the battlefield, what the distances would be northbound and southbound without lay-bys. I think I got 7.5 kilometres in one distance.
Yes, that is in the southbound direction. In the northbound direction, it would be 13 kilometres. That is if we did not construct these
yes.
two lay-bys
within. But the remainder of the proposal stayed as is.
Yes.
Yep. Perfect. Thanks for that, Mr. Mill.
Thank you, sir. Not want to give up on the question of lay-bys. Just one question on that topic. Mr. Robertson, taking into account your professional responsibilities and your expertise as a designer, would you recommend to Transport Scotland the omission of either or both of the proposed lay-bys at Urrard, to cut that short?
No, these lay-bys should be retained in order to address concerns associated with road safety and to reduce the spacing between successive lay-bys.
Thank you. And then can I take you to document TS 408.47? TS 408.47, a letter from Historic Environment Scotland to Dr. Blewett at Transport Scotland, dated 22 January 2019. The third page of that letter, I'm afraid this is a lay-by question as well. It's the third page of TS 408.47.
I think I found it on PDF page 250. Is that right?
252. Is that what it says at the top? Sorry. PDF page 252. I just give you a second to read that paragraph to yourself, Mr. Robertson, and then confirm for the inquiry what Historic Environment Scotland's position is in relation to the sighting of lay-bys on the inventory battlefield.
Apologies, can you just remind me which paragraph it is?
The top paragraph. For these matters, you have taken the view that driver safety is the overriding consideration in their spacing and location.
Yes, just taking the various points within that paragraph, you have taken the view that driver safety is overriding consideration in their spacing and location. That is correct. They have understood our position correctly. The second sentence, we note the proposed laybys are not intended to be the enhanced laybys which were initially being considered for inclusion within the scheme. We have already covered that the enhanced laybys within proximity to Killiecrankie are 1.1 and 1.6 kilometres from the northbound and southbound laybys respectively that are proposed. The third sentence, although these elements of the road add to the overall footprint of the road within the inventory site, we recognise that there is a balance to be struck with other issues. Again, that is correct. That is our position as well. However, the impact of proposals within the inventory battlefield remains significant, as acknowledged in your letter. Mr. Dempsey will explain more detail on that later on. And the final point, on this basis, we recommend that you continue to explore ways of mitigating the impact on these features. That is correct as well. We have introduced the 1 metre high natural stone wall to the rear of the lay-by, and there's also several other measures that have been discussed with Mr. Campbell's clients with regard to the embankment slope behind the natural stone wall at that location.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robertson. I have no other questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks both for that. We'll take a 15-minute break now, so until 11:10, when we're moving on to hear the evidence of Mr. Carmichael. Is that right? Yeah. Okay, 11:10.
Thank you, sir. The next witness for the promoter is Mr. Rory Carmichael. Mr. Carmichael, could you please read for us your summary precognition?
I, Rory Carmichael, am an Associate Director of Environmental Assessment with Jacobs UK Limited, having joined the company in 2015. I'm a chartered environmentalist with over 9 years' experience of preparing environmental assessments for development projects in the UK, including roads infrastructure projects. I'm the environmental coordinator for the proposed scheme, coordinating a team of environmental specialists that iteratively assessed and refined the preferred design manual for roads and bridges, Stage 2 design, undertook environmental impact assessment, and prepared the DMRB Stage 3 environmental statement. The evidence I shall present relates to the EIA, the preparation of the ES submitted in association with the draft orders, and the environmental review of the refined design. In addressing the objection raised, I will establish that the proposals have been assessed in accordance with the requirements of the EIA Scotland Regulations 1999, and that a robust ES supports the draft orders. I will also demonstrate that environmental assessments have formed part of the identification of the proposed scheme. Section 3 of my full precognition summarises the assessment process that was followed for the proposed scheme during the 3 DMRB assessment stages. DMRB Stage 1 identified environmental disadvantages, disadvantages and constraints associated with broadly defined route corridors. Environmental assessment formed part of DMRB Stage 2 through input to sifting assessments, identification of route options, and the assessment of environmental impacts resulting from the route options. The final outcome of DMRB Stage 2 is the identification of a preferred route option that has progressed to DMRB Stage 3. During DMRB Stage 3, an EIA was undertaken in accordance with the EIA regulations and as informed by guidance contained within Volume 11 of the DMRB. Volume 11 sets out a process for the environmental assessment of roads projects. Schedule 4 of the EIA regulations outlines the information to be included in an ES. The ES for the proposed scheme was prepared in line with these requirements. Environmental assessment and engineering design are deliberately undertaken in parallel during the EIA to provide interaction between prevailing environmental standards and the development of the proposed scheme design. As such, the promoter has been able to take cognizance of environmental considerations and identify environmental mitigation through the EIA process to avoid or reduce potentially significant impacts on the receiving environment. The EIA process was informed by extensive consultation on the scope of the EIA topics to be assessed, and feedback was provided from consultees on draft assessments. Following publication of the ES and draft road orders, refinements to the DMRB Stage 3 design were made to address concerns raised by objectors, and the refined design was developed. An environmental review of the refined design is provided in the development of the scheme report. Following this work, Scottish Natural Heritage, Scottish Environment Protection Agency, Cairngorms National Park Authority, Historic Environment Scotland, and Perth and Kinross Council, who are advised by Perth and Kinross Heritage Trusts on cultural heritage matters, have no outstanding objections to the proposed scheme. Section 4 of my full precognition responds to objections made by the grouped objectors with Killiecrankie and Fincastle Community Council and by Erd Estate from their statements of case, outline statements of case and earlier concerns raised during the consultation process as follows. The grouped objectors and Erd Estate are concerned due to the decision made at DMRB Stage 2 for northbound widening at the Altgrenagh Underbridge. This results in the northbound underbridge overlapping with the boundary of the River Tay Special Area of Conservation. However, as the structures for all DMRB Stage 2 route options would clear span the SAC, none of the structures in the route options would result in land take from the designation. This is evident in the proposed scheme that has been developed for the DMRB Stage 3 design and the refined design, where the CPO allows for construction of the Altgrenagh Underbridge over the SAC such that there is no land take from the SAC associated with the new bridge. With the proposed scheme, the SAC area would remain available to qualifying interest species at this location, such as Atlantic salmon and lamprey. A detailed consideration of the potential effects on European sites, including the River Tay SAC, has been undertaken in a habitats regulations appraisal. The HRA considers the crossing of the River Tay SAC at the Altgrenagh, mitigation for construction drainage, and the location of outfalls. The HRA demonstrates that the proposed scheme will not cause an adverse effect on site integrity. Related to the River Tay SAC, Blair Athol Area Tourist Association expressed a preference for widening the Essingall Underbridge to the northbound side during DMRB Stage 2 due to the fishing quality on the other side. This relates to Section 2 of the DMRB Stage 2 route options, the section north of Aldcloone. The concern was recognised when it was assessed at DMRB Stage 2 that southbound widening has the potential to impact on functionally important habitat of the River Tay SAC. Along with engineering reasons, this resulted in northbound widening within Section 2 being recommended as the preferred route to be progressed to DMRB Stage 3. During DMRB Stage 2, Ms McLaughlin and Mr Bax raised concerns over impacts on the River Tay SAC and other designations in the vicinity of Killiecrankie, including sites of special scientific interest. Chapter 12 of the ES assesses that there would be no residual significant impacts on the pass of Killiecrankie SSI or the Aldcloone and Invervac Meadows SSI. The grouped objectors state that the alignment causes maximum loss of woodland at Killiecrankie. With respect to ecology, the difference in loss of woodland was not considered to be a differentiator between DMRB Stage 2 route options. Paragraph 4.3.21 in Chapter 4 of the ES explains that the iterative design process has also been developed during DMRB Stage 3 so that the proposed scheme avoids woodland on the ancient woodland inventory and areas of native woodland. The grouped objectors also query the removal of the proposed deciduous woodland planting in Field F9 and suggest that it was part of the landscape and visual mitigation for the DMRB Stage 3 design. However, I can confirm that the purpose of this area of planting was for ecological mitigation, and the replacement of an equivalent area of planting proposed north of Clunes provides a comparable biodiversity benefit. The grouped objectors and Erd Estate assert that the refined design requires its own ES. With regards to the information for inclusion in an ES, Schedule 4, Part 1, Paragraphs 3 to 4 of the EIA regulations explain that it must include a description of the environment likely to be significantly affected by the development and a description of the likely significant effects of the development on the environment. The environmental review of the refined design presented in the development of the scheme report shows that there would be no additional significant impacts in terms of the EIA regulations and that the significance level of residual impacts reported in the ES would be no worse for the refined design. As such, it is considered that the ES remains adequate. The grouped objectors state that HES, Perth and Kinross Heritage Trust and Cairngorms National Park Authority were not asked to examine the refined design on its own merits. However, the objection response letters to HES and Perth and Kinross Heritage Trust by Perth and Kinross Council provide a summary of the key impacts on the battlefield that would result from the refined design. As CNPA's objection was on the basis of endorsing the position of HES, Cairngorms National Park Authority were provided with an update on the position of HES within their objection response letter. The grouped objectors also object on the basis of infrastructure being built closest to most homes in Killiecrankie. However, impacts of a road scheme on residential receptors are not solely dependent on their proximity. Mr Lancaster and Dr Palmer will explain the visual and noise assessments undertaken respectively. With respect to air quality, the DMRB Stage 2 assessment identified that the impacts of all proposed route options on local air quality were anticipated to be very similar, and that none were considered significant in the context of the EIA regulations. In their objection letter, Ms McLaughlin and Mr Bax also raised the point of objection in relation to air quality impacts. The assessment reported in Chapter 16 of the ES concludes that there would be no significant residual local air quality impacts. I disagree with the suggestion from Mr Cuthbert and Mr McLean, part of the grouped objectors, that the refined design results in more loss of woodland on the ancient woodland inventory than the DMRB Stage 3 design. In total, the refined design results in a loss of verified woodland on the AWI of approximately 12.87 hectares, compared to approximately 12.9 hectares associated with the DMRB Stage 3 design. The evidence I have provided to the inquiry demonstrates that comprehensive environmental assessments have been undertaken which have helped inform the route selection process, that environmental issues have been considered throughout the design process in order to avoid, reduce or offset potential adverse impacts on the environment, that the proposed scheme would have no adverse effects on site integrity of the River Tay SAC, that the proposed scheme would have no significant residual impacts on the passive Killiecrankie SSI or the Alcloon and Invervac Meadows SSI, that loss of woodland is not considered to be a differentiator between route options, and the proposed scheme does not represent the maximum woodland loss because measures have been incorporated within the design of the proposed scheme to reduce woodland loss, that the differences in noise, visual and air quality impacts at residential receptors are not sufficient to be considered a differentiator between northbound and southbound widening route options, that the refined design would cause no additional significant impacts when compared to those reported in the ES, and a new ES is not required, and that I disagree that consultees were only asked to compare the DMRB Stage 3 design with the refined design. I have demonstrated that an EIA has been undertaken for the proposed scheme in accordance with the EIA regulations, and that objections have been appropriately addressed. I therefore respectfully ask the reporter to recommend to Scottish Ministers that they make orders sought.
Thank you, Mr Carmichael. We heard a discussion with Mr Robertson about enhanced lay-by at Killiecrankie. Was the opportunity to locate an enhanced lay-by at Killiecrankie looked at beyond the strategy stage?
No.
When was the decision taken not to proceed?
During DMRB Stage 3, the decision was taken not to proceed with the enhanced lay-by.
So in terms of the answer you gave to that first question, the consideration, I take it, of enhanced lay-by endured until the stage that the decision taken not to proceed at Stage 3?
Yes.
That's beyond strategy stage, though, isn't it?
Yes, appreciate that.
So your first answer
was incorrect.
Wasn't accurate. Okay.
Why was that decision taken? What were the reasons for that decision being taken at Stage 3 beyond strategy stage?
We're instructed by Transport Scotland that we couldn't acquire land for enhanced lay-bys through compulsory purchase.
whose land would have been required?
Ruard Estate.
Can I take you now to TS 078.40? Now, the letter that I want to take you to begins on the PDF at page 129, but perhaps we could just turn immediately to page 155 of the PDF. Now, while that's being found, hopefully nobody takes exception with me explaining that this is a letter written by Dr. Blewett of Transport Scotland to Mr. Campbell, dated 22 August 2019, with Mr. Campbell acting on behalf of the House of Urard LLP. Now, I've asked you to look at page 155. Could you, I should pass over to you now. Can you explain to the inquiry what the document on the screen that I've referred you to is?
It's a letter of
Answer the question for the moment, please. The authorship of this letter is said to be the author of this letter is said to be Dr. Blewett, who, of course, given evidence and was not asked about it. So, whilst I don't object to the question per se, I have a question about whether or not this witness is, and I don't mean this in an insulting way, a competent witness to answer questions about the letter.
Okay, we can see how this goes, and it may be that you want to pick this up in cross-examination or elsewhere.
Mr. Carmichael, picking up on, again, the discussion with Mr. Robertson, we see that the document is a draft undertaking by the Scottish ministers in favour of the House of Urard LLP. Under the heading Urard House Walled Garden, can you set out for us briefly what undertaking has been offered? Now, that's paragraph numbered 6.
Point A of part 6 is that the contractor is required to install a solid temporary hoarding comprising of fully enclosed timber or steel or the like from the commencement of construction and throughout the construction activities in order to minimise the risk of construction vehicles striking the site-facing facades of the wall. Point B is to install a temporary barrier approximately 50 metres in length along the side of the site boundary at the walled garden, again from the commencement of construction throughout the duration of construction. Point C is that the contractor is required to prepare and agree with Transport Scotland site representative a detailed method statement prior to all construction activities commencing in proximity to the walled garden. And that method statement will identify vibration monitoring locations and vibration thresholds. And point D is to procure the appointed contractor to comply with the identified vibration monitoring locations and thresholds in proximity to the walled garden.
And continuing with this draft undertaking proposed on behalf of the Scottish ministers, can you explain to us what the offer put forward is in relation to mixed woodland planting along the length of the scheme within Urard Estate at numbered paragraphs 7 and 8?
There's a commitment to increase the proportion of feathered trees, so those that are between 1.5 and 2.5 metres tall within the areas of mixed woodland planting between chainages 1900 and 2800, and that's increased the proportion to 25%. Typically it's between 5 and 10%. That's the starting point. And point 8 is to increase the proportion of Scots pine to 30% through the same chainages.
And has a response to this undertaking of 22nd August 2019 been received from the House of Urard?
Not as far as I know.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Bax.
Thank you, Mr. Carmichael. I'm sorry to labour the point, but I thought on lay-bys we'd already established clearly from Mr. Robertson that the assertion at the village hall was misleading in relation to the fact that enhanced lay-bys had been rejected in an early part of the scheme. You seem to perhaps be contradicting that in your by saying that enhanced lay-bys were only rejected at DMRB stage 3.
That's my understanding of the process of how the lay-bys were developed, and the enhanced lay-bys were developed to that point before they didn't carry on.
Well, I just think there is a difference here between yours and the evidence we heard earlier. So I would stand by the conclusion that we had reached that the community were misled into thinking that the enhanced lay-by, the dropping of the enhanced lay-by, was a concession when in fact it had already been dismissed. Anyway, that's as far as I want to go on that topic.
Do you want to comment on that assertion?
No.
Turning to your evidence and your precognition, I'm interested to know the changes that were made following the introduction of the inventory of battlefields on the environmental impact assessment regulations. Were there any changes, or was it the same?
The EIA regulations that
yes. How did they change following the launch of the inventory?
The EIA regulations used for the environmental statement were the 1999 regulations, and the inventory came in 2011.
So there was no impact on
the consideration of the inventory within the assessment. The battlefield was considered within the assessment in the EIA, yes.
How?
As a receptor in the Cultural Heritage chapter.
So it just introduced a new receptor as opposed to changing the underlying regulations, is that?
It was a receptor from the start of the EIA process for the proposed scheme.
Can you also let us know if the change in status of Historic Scotland to Historic Environment Scotland from 1st of October 2015 affected its role in this planning process?
No, I wouldn't say it would.
Just a small point, but in your full precondition 2.2, you talk about the new guidelines. Have these been adopted into UK legislation? They were adopted into UK legislation on the 16th of May 2017. I was unclear from reading your precognition whether they apply to this scheme or because the scheme started before the 16th of May 2000, whether they were not involved in the new scheme. Which one is that?
They weren't included. They weren't part of the assessment.
They weren't part of the assessment. Would it have made any difference to your assessment if they had been?
The presentation of the EIA would be different, yeah.
Just the presentation or any of the...
some of the topic areas would potentially change as well, depending on the scoping process.
And have you been involved in any schemes subsequent to this one where they have...
I've not been an EIA coordinator for a scheme under the new regulations.
I'm intrigued by the explanation of the not infringing on the SAC at the Killiecrankie underbridge. I think paragraph 411. Is it the understanding that there is no infringement unless there is building actually which takes place in the river, in the water?
Associated with the bridge structure?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's no physical impact on the SAC designation where the Killiecrankie underbridge crosses the designation.
So even if there's construction takes place over the designation, it doesn't infringe it as far as the SAC regulations are concerned.
The Habitats Regulations appraisal that was undertaken considers the construction of the bridge as well as all works in the proposed scheme and concludes that there will be no adverse effect on site integrity.
Well, I understand that. The question is slightly different, and that I was just asking, are the SAC regulations quite clear about the need to be, the infringement only take place if construction took place within the river, within the riverbank? So I think what you're saying is because the construction is in the air above the river, then it doesn't infringe.
It doesn't physically impact on the SAC, yes.
Can I turn to the role of the statutory consultees? And you describe your role as as being a coordinator in the planning process. 3.2 in your full recognition. 320, sorry. Do I understand it that each respective expert liaises with their respective consultees? So, for example, Mr. Dempsey would primarily be involved with dealing with HES, Mr. Robertson presumably with CPO. Is that the way that the process works?
They would be involved, and I would be involved in some cases if required. There are other instances where I would be involved and specialists may not have been involved in the consultation. It depends on the issue, I suppose, who needs to be involved in the consultation to provide their required input so that we get the most from whatever we're consulting on.
And their comments, as it goes through the various iterations, would inform the decision making.
The comments from the consultees. Yeah, they would. Yeah, where appropriate.
If we could refer to TS 4115, 411 spot 5, and TS 411 spot 6. There's obviously a range of feedback comments here. Some are just said, noted, or responses, further details will be made available at the next stage. So I take it that's how the ESG operates, that if people have comments to make, they're made, they're noted, and then if any further clarification is required, it's left to the next stage of evaluation to feedback.
That was the general process for this particular consultation. So the comments they provided on the Stage 2 reports, that was the process that we followed there. And depending on the comment that they gave, we provided a response, or it was relevant for Stage 3, depending on what they raised.
Again, perhaps with hindsight, many of the comments that we see in those two documents do reappear as objections after Stage 3. Do you think more could have been done, perhaps, to inform the consultees of the implications of the design choices at an earlier stage?
I suppose more could be done. Because you could always do more, but we considered the level of consultation through the whole process to be appropriate to inform the design and the assessment of impacts.
Can I turn to your full precognition 3.22? These are the landscape and visual differentiators between the Old Clune Junction variants A and B. I just wonder, are you satisfied that consultees had all the necessary information to understand the implications of the junction options at that time? In particular, in terms of how it related to the earthworks required on the battlefield?
Associated with the junctions?
Associated with the junction options?
Yes. The junctions were explained in the environmental assessment, and the implication of them on their respective topics were assessed in the draft Stage 2 assessments that were provided to the consultees.
Just as a matter of interest, would you have had in your role responsibility for informing or consulting with the public about information that's shared with the statutory consultees, or was that outside your remit?
I don't understand the question, sorry. Could you just repeat that, please?
Well, I'm thinking in terms of the various feedback that was solicited from the statutory consultees, such as HES, PKHT. Was it part of your remit to share those concerns with the public at the public consultations?
No.
No. Turning to paragraph 3.49 of your full precognition. The archaeological investigations were undertaken after Stage 3 in order to satisfy HES and PKHT. These consultees had indicated that much of the information which was discovered after Stage 3 had been requested during Stage 2. Does, therefore, this sequence of planning still appear to you to be adequate, or again, do you think there should have been more information garnered at Stage 2?
No, I would say the level of information at each stage was appropriate to inform the assessment of impacts.
And you don't think that this sequence limited the route options during Stage 2?
No.
Because by the time stage 3 had come and these assessments were carried out, it would have been unlikely that any decisions taken at stage 2 would be reversed.
I think Ms McMillan has explained that decisions taken are often revisited if there's something relevant that needs to be considered.
Turning to paragraph 4, spot 3.1, on the full precondition. You say that you disagree with our suggestion that the consultation authorities are restrained so as only to be invited to comment on the difference between the DMRB 3 design and the refined design. However, I would refer you to document KFCC 19. I don't know if we've got if we can get that particular document, KFCC 19. This is a letter from HES to the objectors where they clearly state, and I quote, this on the third paragraph. Third paragraph. We can only comment on the proposals being consulted on and can only look at each case on its own merit. Would you agree that HES, therefore, is clearly of the same opinion as us, that they're only able to comment on what's in front of them?
Yes, that's what it says, I believe. And that was in relation to us presenting them the refined design.
Correct. Thank you. And a final point on the requirement for circumstances which might require a new environmental statement. You say only significant impact would be necessary, but I'm not quite clear what that involves. Is there a quantitative change which amounts to significant, or is it a matter of judgment, and in that case presumably your own judgment as to what is significant and what is not significant?
It depends on the environmental topic that's being looked at. So depending on what that is, they'll have assessment methodologies for determining significance and what's considered to be a significant impact. So it's a mixture of criteria, and for some topics it's professional judgment.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Carmichael. No more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bix. Mr. Campbell, any questions for this witness?
Just a few, sir, if I may. Just picking up that last. Sorry. Just picking up that last point, Mr. Carmichael. The proposition was put in objections that the refined design might require an additional or an addendum to the environmental statement. Can you speak into the microphone when you do reply, because you've been quite hard to hear. I think the proposition that's advanced is that where changes have less impact than changes that have already been assessed, then that militates against an addendum to the environmental statement. Have I put that correctly?
Part of it, yes, I'd say. And the other. What's
the other part then that I missed out?
You referred to them being better, but there are instances where the impacts are the same as reported. So so long as they don't increase the significance of impacts such that impacts become significant that weren't significant as reported in the ES.
And then you say, I'm sorry, I can't find the place now, but you say that each of those changes, so long as they've been subject to, I think you use the expression environmental report, then an addendum is not considered necessary. Is that right?
An environmental review of design changes.
Yeah. What does that mean, actually?
So if a design proposal, if a change to the DMRB Stage 3 design is proposed, we would review that in light of the basement and impact assessment to check whether the magnitude of impacts would change.
Okay. Do we see the changes between DMRB 3 and the refined scheme at Chapter 8 of TS 206? That's on page 34, TS 206. PDF change, page 34. Yeah, that's the page. Thank you. Have you got it?
Yeah, just...
Okay. Try and keep your voice up, please. Could I just run through those with you quickly? 8.2 is headed description of the changes. And the first is the reduced northbound diverged slip road of the Alt-Clune grade separated junction. Second, I think after figure 8.1 is refinement of earthworks. The third on page 37 is combination of SUDS features. Is that right? The fourth on page 39 is the refinement of deciduous woodland planting. Is that right? You have to say yes, otherwise
yes.
We can't hear you.
Yes.
Or, sorry, you have to say yes or no, otherwise we can't hear you. Okay. And your evidence, if I've understood it correctly, is that none of those changes have a greater environmental impact than impacts previously assessed.
A greater significance of residual impact.
A greater significance, sorry.
Yes.
Speak the language. All right. Thank you. So that I understand that. Am I right in thinking that your evidence on woodland spread or woodland planting and also on noise depend on Mr. Lancaster and Mr. Palmer? They're not a result of your assessment, but they're a result of their assessments.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Milne showed you an undertaking when you opened your evidence in chief, to which I objected rather tentatively, but objected nonetheless. And you didn't have any part in drawing that up, did you?
And I coordinated inputs from the landscape team with regards to the percentage of feathered trees.
Thank you. So those are all the questions I have for Mr. Carmichael. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Just one question from me, Mr. Carmichael, and it's going back to the need or otherwise for an addendum to the ES. I appreciate what you say in paragraph 4.27 of your recognition that there would be no more or no different likely significant effects in the refined scheme. Is there anything I can look at either in the regs or the circular that specifically says what should be done at that stage, i.e. if changes are made to design? No. That's the best I've got there.
That paragraph there explains, well, the whole of Schedule 4 states what needs to be included in the ES. And
great.
That's the basis of that particular assessment.
Thanks for that. Mr. Milne.
And if I may add, sir, that certainly in closing submission, obviously I need to consider the evidence as a whole, but there may be some comment on the legal aspects of the point raised about the need for an addendum.
That would be useful.
Just one question, Mr. Carmichael, if you can go to the letter which Mr. Bax referred you to, KFCC 19, the letter from Historic Environment Scotland to Ms McLaughlin, 30 May 2019, and the paragraph to which Mr Bax took you, we can only comment on the proposals being consulted on and can only look at each case on its own merits. Is it not the case that the proposals which Historic Environment Scotland were being consulted upon were the proposed scheme?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you, Mr Carmichael. Okay, we're fairly close to lunchtime, but I think it's worth starting with Mr Dempsey, unless you would have a strong preference not to do so before lunch. No. Okay, let's start.
No. Is this screen not working? Yes. Okay. Thank you. I've got that. I'll knock it over otherwise.
Mr Dempsey, could you please read out your summary recognition?
My name is Jonathan Dempsey and I am a Senior Associate Director of Heritage with Jacobs UK Limited. My professional qualifications, experience and role in the A9 Julie Killiecrankie to Glen Garry project, the proposed scheme, are detailed in my recognition and my CV. The evidence contained in my recognition relates to impacts on cultural heritage assets that could potentially result from the construction and operation of the proposed scheme, primarily with regard to the Battle of Killiecrankie, which is included in the inventory of historic battlefields, is of national importance and was assessed to be of high value in the Design Manual for Roads and Bridges, or DMRB, Stage 3 Environmental Statement, or ES. Objections relating to potential impacts on the Category B listed Urd House and its walled garden are also identified, along with potential impacts on Urd Steading. These historic buildings were assessed to be of medium value in the ES. Objections in relation to potential impacts on cultural heritage assets in Skirmish Fields 1 and 2 are also addressed. Cultural heritage inputs into the ES were undertaken based on DMRB Volume 11, Section 3, Part 2, Cultural Heritage, Managing Change in the Historic Environment, Historic Battlefields, and Managing Change in the Historic Environment Setting. Inputs into the ES included a re-examination of sources used for the DMRB Stage 2 environmental assessment, which included a metal detecting survey. To inform the ES, a walkover survey and geophysical survey were also undertaken. Information from these sources were used to define the special qualities and key landscape characteristics of Killiecrankie battlefield, presented in the ES Chapter 15 Cultural Heritage. As identified in Chapter 15, the DMRB Stage 3 design avoided impacts on most special qualities and key landscape characteristics. Embedded mitigation to reduce impacts where avoidance wasn't possible was also identified, along with specific mitigation, primarily preservation by record. The ES assessed an overall residual impact of moderate significance on Killiecrankie battlefield, which is considered significant in the context of the EIA regulations. Potential impacts on Erd House, Walled Garden and Erd Steading were assessed and presented in ES Appendix A15.4, Cultural Heritage Impact, Mitigation and Residual Impact Tables. No physical impact on these historic buildings were identified. The ES assessed residual impacts of slight significance on the setting of these historic buildings during construction and operation. After mitigation, no significant impacts were identified on the cultural heritage assets in skirmish fields 1 or 2. With the aim of resolving concerns relating to the published draft orders and environmental statement, as requested by Historic Environment Scotland and Perth and Kinross Heritage Trust, or PKHT, to help inform their understanding of potential impacts on the battlefield, archaeological investigations, comprising archaeological metal detecting, geophysical survey and trowel trenching, were undertaken in 2018. LiDAR analysis was also undertaken. The special qualities and key landscape characteristics identified in ES Chapter 15 were reviewed based on the results of the 2018 archaeological investigations and LiDAR analysis. While small modifications were made to these, overall they were considered accurate. As Mr. Robertson has explained in his precognition, to resolve concerns relating to the published draft orders in ES, the DMRB Stage 3 design was refined to reduce the footprint within Killiecrankie battlefield. These refinements are collectively referred to as a refined design and are included as part of the proposed scheme. The refined design has reduced the magnitude of impact on the battlefield. This reduction of impact has been acknowledged by Historic Environment Scotland and PKHT. With the mitigation identified in ES Section 15.5 in place, no significant residual impacts on Killiecrankie battlefield are predicted during construction. This is the same as was assessed for the DMRB Stage 3 design and presented in the ES. Operation of the refined design would reinforce the existing severance of the battlefield by the existing A9. The residual significance of impact has been assessed as moderate. This is the same significance of impact assessed for the DMRB Stage 3 design and presented in the ES. Objections are identified in Section 4 of my precognition. In response to these, I explain that the importance of Killiecrankie battlefield in a national and international context has been given due consideration. Impacts on the majority of special qualities and key landscape characteristics have been avoided. Where avoidance has not been possible, impacts have been reduced through design. Additional measures to mitigate and offset the impact on the battlefield have been identified. This approach aligns with manage and change in the historic environment, historic battlefields. There is no evidence that the archaeological remains at Lagnabuig date to the time of the battle,
or that they were associated with it. The evidence indicates this area was heavily disturbed by the construction of the existing A9, and the remains that do survive date to the 19th century, which is after the time of the battle. Lagnabuig was therefore not identified as a special quality of Killiecrankie battlefield in the ES. The evidence suggests that those areas of Lagnabuig within the land made available, or LMA, have been largely disturbed, limiting potential for the presence of unknown archaeological remains. Those areas within the Compulsory Purchase Order, or CPO, comprise woodland to be retained for ecological mitigation, so any archaeological remains that may be present won't be disturbed by the proposed scheme. Tomb Clavers was identified as a special quality of Killiecrankie battlefield in the ES. There would be no physical impact on tomb clavers from construction of the proposed scheme. With the implementation of the noise mitigation identified in ES Chapter 17, no significant noise impacts during construction are anticipated. The presence of existing woodland, which would be retained, means that there would only be partially filtered views of the construction of the proposed Altland Junction northbound diverge embankment to the northwest of Tomb Clavers. No impact on Tomb Clavers during construction has therefore been assessed. As Tomb Clavers would be mostly screened by existing woodland to be retained, no visual impact during operation has been assessed. As identified by Dr. Palmer in his precognition, a beneficial noise impact during operation is predicted. No impact on the setting of tomb clavers during operation has therefore been assessed. Runrury House Redoubt was identified as a special quality of Killiecrankie battlefield in the ES. It is located on the site on which Erd House now stands. It is predicted that there would be no impact on this cultural heritage asset during construction or operation. Geophysical survey has not identified evidence for a redoubt or settlement or graves within the LMA. The current Erd House walled garden is a later feature. It is not associated with the battle and was therefore not identified as a special quality of Killiecrankie battlefield. It was assessed as an historic building and is described later in this precognition. There would be no impact on the terrace in field F7. Moreover, in their evidence, the combined group have misinterpreted features relating to construction of the existing A9 for a terrace in field F6 and F7. I also understand that they have also mislocated one of two terraces identified by Pollard and Oliver, placing it within the LMA. I do not agree with the combined group's definition of the core of the battlefield, or that the location of the line of the government forces would be physically impacted by the proposed scheme. As part of the refined design, Suds Feature B and associated planting were removed from field F9, and this has reduced impacts on battlefield topography. Suds Feature B has been combined with Suds Feature A, located in Skirmish Field 2, which is a less sensitive part of the battlefield, as described later in this precognition. Cultural heritage inputs into the DMRB Stage 2 environmental assessment were undertaken based on guidance provided by 2011 Managing Change in the Historic Environment, Historic Battlefields. The approach used was agreed with Historic Environment Scotland and PKHT. The approach used provided a robust basis for the identification of significant impacts on Killiecrankie battlefield and other cultural heritage assets, and a comparison of route options. The alternative scheme would have a more significant impact on Killiecrankie battlefield than the refined design. This is due to the presence of a cutting which is considered to increase the existing severance between part of the southern slopes of Craigellach and northeast of Runrury, and between the northern and southern parts of the southern slopes of Craigellach key landscape characteristics. The alternative scheme also requires land take from, and the existing severance between, the northern and southern parts of the terraces to the south of Mains of Orchel and the level ground to the south of the existing A9, key landscape characteristic. During operation, the impact of the alternative scheme on Killiecrankie battlefield has been assessed to be large. This is a more significant impact on the battlefield than the moderate impact during operation assessed for the refined design. There is little evidence to associate fields known locally as skirmish fields with the Battle of Killiecrankie. There is evidence for a high degree of disturbance in both fields, which has reduced the potential for unknown archaeological remains. Potential impacts on cultural heritage asset and skirmish fields were identified in ES Appendix A15.4. Mitigation, primarily preservation by record, was also identified. Preservation by record is not unusual and is appropriate for cultural heritage assets of this type, where it is not possible to preserve in situ or to reduce impacts through design. This approach aligns with guidance provided by PKHE. No significant residual impacts were assessed. Any potential non-compliance of the proposed scheme with policy aspirations to protect, preserve or interpret historic battlefields needs to be balanced against a range of factors. These include other environmental considerations, constraints presented by upgrading an existing road, and against the overarching national benefits of the proposed scheme, for example, improving connectivity, enhancing safety for all users, and promoting social and regional economic opportunities. There would be no physical impact on Urd House, walled garden, or Urd steading. The relationship between these buildings would be retained. Construction and operation of the proposed scheme would be largely screened by existing vegetation, which would be retained. And as identified by Dr. Palmer, no significant noise impacts are predicted. Measures have been identified in the ES to prevent accidental damage to the walled garden during construction. During construction and operation, the impact on the setting of these cultural heritage assets has been assessed to be slight. The proposed scheme takes into account the provisions of Section 59 of the Planning, Listed Building and Conservation Areas Scotland Act 1997. Whilst the residual significance of impact on Killiecrankie battlefield has been assessed to be moderate during operation of the proposed scheme, this is not commensurate with complete degradation or destruction of the battlefield. On the basis of the evidence that I have provided, I consider that cultural heritage impacts have been properly assessed and objections made have been appropriately addressed. I would therefore respectfully ask the reporter to recommend to the Scottish ministers that they make the orders sought.
Thank you, Mr. Dempsey. There are a few things that I need to ask you about, and if I may start with the evidence in your precognition regarding special regard under the Listed Building Act. Perhaps with reference to paragraph 4.2.3 of document TS-211. You could have that in front of you. TS-211, the Plans and Policies Compliance Report, which we were looking at yesterday. Paragraph 4.2.3. Mr. Dempsey, what is the applicability of the Listed Building Act to a scheme which is being proposed under the Roads Scotland Act?
Don't answer the question, please. It's a purely legal question. It's a matter for submission. Not Mr. Dempsey, I'm sorry, is eminently well qualified, but he's not a lawyer.
I think as our specialist on this topic, I'd like to hear his answer, although I do appreciate that all parties might wish to address this in closing submissions.
I don't think ultimately it's going to be controversial, but it is a legal question, so if you could note that I've objected for the moment, I'm happy to go with that reservation.
Mr. Dempsey, with reference to paragraph 4.2.3 of this report, can you please explain the applicability of Section 59 of the Listed Building Act to a scheme to be consented under the Roads Scotland Act?
As noted in the paragraph, I would understand that it is not directly applicable.
As an expert in this area, do you take it into account?
I certainly would have taken it into account, yes.
Would it be fair to say it's applied by analogy?
It is a leading question.
It is a leading question. We shall move on. Staying with that report, paragraph 4.4.7, the very last sentence, Mr. Campbell took Dr. Blewett to this, and if I remember correctly, Dr. Blewett deferred to your judgment on such matters. The final sentence of paragraph 4.4.7 says further, even if this threshold has not been met, requiring special regard to be had to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting, the threshold of avoiding serious detriment to the building has not been breached. It was put to Dr. Blewett that only the consequences for the building had been taken into account. Is that fair?
That wouldn't be my understanding. We would have assessed both the potential impacts on the building, but then also impacts on the setting of the building as how they contribute to our ability to appreciate and understand the building itself. I think it would be worthwhile if we have a look at the definition of setting as proposed in CD 248, which is the managing change in the historic environment. So that really states it, or it defines setting on page 6 as setting is the way the surroundings of an historic asset or place contribute to how it is understood, appreciated and experienced. So therefore we would have, as part of a team, or I would have looked not only at the building itself, but then also how the surroundings, the setting of that building contribute to it. That's explained a little bit more throughout my precognition.
Do you have a reference in your precognition for the reporter's notes about the approach that you have taken? to the definition of setting?
It would have been the approach to the assessment is outlined both at stage 2 and DMRB stage 3 in the environmental statement in section 4.20. In my recognition, yes, I beg your pardon. And also then in Chapter 14 of the DMRB Stage 2 environmental assessment, for example, paragraphs 14.4.26, 14.4.27, we would have identified that that there would potentially be impacts on Urd House, its walled garden, and the setting of these arising from the DMRB Stage 2 route options, in this case option 3 and option 4.
Mr. Dempsey, I'm sorry for staying for a second with special regard. Could you turn, please, to subsection 3 of section 59 of the Listed Building Act? Now, that's CD 337, although I appreciate you give a full quote of section 59 in your recognition, so it might be easier just to use that. Could you read out for me, please, the whole of subsection 3, just 3 lines?
Sorry, being very focals. In this section, preserving in relation to a building means preserving it either in its existing state or subject only to such alterations or extensions as can be carried out without serious detriment to its character, and development includes redevelopment.
Does that section offer guidance in relation to the definition of preserving in the context of setting or just a building?
It states explicitly in relation to a building.
How did you pay special regard during the DMRB stages, given that you've said that you have taken this section into account?
To answer that question, I would like to direct the reporter to section 4.20.29, where I identify that we've taken it into account. It was referred to in the SEA in both Chapter 14 of the DMRB Stage 2 assessment and also then Appendix A 15.1 of the environmental statement. We make specific reference to the provisions of Section 59, although I'd note that there is an error in the paragraph numbers quoted. More so than that, we would have given appropriate weight to special regards through the assessment process, that through assessing the value or sensitivity of receptors in the baseline, and that along with the magnitude of effect using professional judgment guided by the DMRB guidance, would have informed the assessment of significance of impact. We would also have used, as detailed in my recognition, the managing change guidance for setting. Following that, at stage 2 and stage 3, the assessment of significance of impact on the setting of Urd House and its walled garden was assessed to be slight. For me, I would have equated slight with and without serious detriment.
In terms of what you were assessing, how you had identified the asset, could I take you please to the DMRB Stage 2 Scheme Assessment Report, Volume 1, Part 6, which is found in CD018, the final PDF of the bundle in that folder. And I'm on page 018. Sorry, so many numbers there. CD018. Volume 1, Part 6, so it's the final PDF if you've got a string of PDFs there, Mr. Campbell. Page 84. Yeah. And Mr. Dempsey, the question I have here at stage 2 is what this part of the stage 2 environmental report is telling us regarding what you have assessed.
This is the descriptions provided by the listing description for Killiecrankie Road House, identified as Asset 341 in the DMRB Stage 2 assessment. Within that, it provides a description of not only the building itself, but identifies that there is a connection with the Battle of Killiecrankie, and therefore that would have informed our assessment of the setting of Road House, which would have been augmented with site inspections undertaken from the northwest as Killiecrankie battlefield was inspected.
Now, based on your expertise and experiences, is this approach commensurate with what one would normally see at stage 2 of the DMRB process?
I beg your pardon for interrupting again, but we have no evidence other than what's in the recognition of Mr. Dempsey's expertise and experience in this matter. He's described fully as an archaeologist with distinguished archaeological qualifications, but nothing beyond that. If it's intended that it's those qualifications which can relate to the question, then of course I can't object. But it is a different question from archaeology.
Is the question whether Mr. Dempsey has had similar experience at other stage 2 assessments? Mr. Milne.
Yes. Just checking what. If it assists, we can have a look at Mr. Dempsey's CV, which is lodged as TS 201.6, where we see that key skills and specialisms include assessment of effects of cultural heritage assets, archaeological remains, historic buildings, historic landscapes, and then we go on to see Mr. Dempsey's experience in all stages of environmental impact assessment. Mr. Dempsey, is the approach which we see in this document still on the screen from the Stage 2 environmental report commensurate based on your experience with what happens in other schemes at DMRB Stage 2?
It is, yes.
To take that one step further, do you regard the level of information and assessment undertaken at this stage to be sufficient to inform the recommendation and decision taken at stage 2?
I would do, yes.
a document which we were looking at yesterday, and again, Dr. Blewett deferred to your expertise, TS 411. And if my notes are correct, page 151 of that PDF. And we see a reference at 14.3.20 in the column on the left-hand side suggests that Urrard House potentially is of high value given its historical associations, etc. Question was asked whether a reassessment was undertaken. Can you remind us, please, the context in which this comment was made and the response given to that comment?
This comment was made on the draft DMRB, the Cultural Heritage chapter of the draft DMRB Stage 2 assessment. So it would have been made by Perth and Kinross Heritage Trust on the draft. So before it was finalised, we would have canvassed and asked for opinion on the draft chapter. It would have been based on our assessment of the sources identified within the appendix, and as I said, some of the other additional sources, historic map and aerial photographs and the site inspection. We would have reviewed it based on using professional judgment based on the criteria outlined in DMRB Volume 11, Section 3, Part 2. And that's based on that. We would have assessed it to be of medium value. It would have taken into account its location within the battlefield. I think it's important to say that this is for Urrard House, as in the historic buildings, the historic building, the walled garden, for assessment purposes and to best serve the needs of both assets. During the assessment process, we identified an additional receptor within the battlefield as Rinrory House Redoubt, and that was the archaeological remains of the Rinrory House, which was the precursor to the current Urrard House. So within that, we mean that that's what I think I was trying to get at, or within the description, to say that it's the only association is with a marker within the landscape. The stronger archaeological associations would have been assessed elsewhere in the assessment as associated with the battlefield.
Indeed, and
sorry, and to answer the second part of your question, it would have been reviewed at DMRB Stage 3, but we were content that the assessment of medium value was appropriate. That would also have aligned, and as detailed in Section 420 of my precognition, with the guidance that was provided at that time at Stage 2 by SHEP, and also then later by HEPS. Sorry, my hesitation, because there's HEP and HEPS. So. HESPs.
Staying on that document, TS 411, could we turn now, please, to another section which was discussed in evidence yesterday, page 18. which is under the Perth and Kinross Council heading. In respect of feedback at draft stage 2, there are 2 rows in particular which I think I can just invite you to comment on what the council was saying and the response. The 2 rows which start general.
Could we zoom in a little bit more, please? I think what thank you. I think what the council are saying here that they found it difficult to align the text and the assessment with the key elements of the battlefield, and also that they would like clearer drawings at a more appropriate scale. Really, for me, I would see that as a purely presentational comment, taken into account the comment made. We revised the text to try and clarify and to try and be more transparent in what our assessment was. So we would have in section 14.6 to address the specific comment, we added table 14.9. Yes, table 14.9 in the chapter 14, the cultural heritage chapter of the DMRB stage 2 assessment. I think it's CD 018. So again, it was just really to help the reader, or for future reference, to enable the reader to more fully understand our assessment of impact. We also note that we included the results of the metal detecting survey that was undertaken in 2015. Those results, or preliminary results, and draft chapters were available as we would have developed the scheme and developed the assessment, but weren't explicitly referenced, so we added in more explicit reference to those into the chapter. And also, while there was a request for photo montages, we stated that those wouldn't be done, but we would add in some of the key views from the slopes of Craigellach, looking towards the scheme, so looking southeast, that sort of direction. So that first row that you identified, that is my understanding of the comment and how we address that comment.
So the second row under general, we see the comment, no assessment of areas of archaeological potential. This is an issue that PKHT would like to see covered in the stage 3 assessment. The response, noted assessment of areas of potential for unknown archaeological remains will be identified at DMRB stage 3. Is it right that there had been no assessment of areas of archaeological potential at this draft stage 2 stage?
Within this archaeological potential, I interpret and is generally understood to be the potential for unknown archaeological remains. At DMRB stage 2, we would have taken into account the potential of the proposed route options to impact on unknown archaeological remains. So we would have assessed them. It's under DMRB at stage 3, it's a slightly more formal process where you would have drawn lines or identified areas more in a more formal basis to present at DMRB stage 2. The assessment of archaeological potential at stage, we would have presented the figures showing the areas of archaeological potential at stage 3, and again that's normal. At stage 2, the assessment of potential would have been based on the results of site inspections undertaken, the desk-based sources that we looked at, including the inventory, assessment of old maps, those types of sources, but also the results of the metal detecting that was undertaken in 2015 to inform the DMRB Stage 2.
Again, in your experience at Stage 2, is this work and what was anticipated to be undertaken at Stage 3 sufficient and appropriate to inform recommendation and decision?
Certainly it's at both Stage 2 and at Stage 3. The surveys undertaken were appropriate at Stage 2 to assess or to identify significant impacts and allow the robust comparison of routes, and then at Stage 3 to allow the identification of significant impacts and appropriate mitigation.
On a slightly different topic, we've read recognitions from the objectors where reference has been made to historic environment policy regarding enhancement. Can I take you please to CD 11, Chapter 15? And it's paragraph 15.5.9. .5.9, yes. Sorry, bear with me for 1 second. .5.19. I was wondering why the reference made no sense. And Mr. Dempsey, could you explain what this paragraph tells us?
It's 15.5.19. Can we go to 15.5.19, please? This is from the mitigation section of the Stage 3 Environmental Assessment, Chapter 15, Cultural Heritage. Within that, we identify the commitment as mitigation for the scheme to work with various interested parties, Historic Environment Scotland, the National Trust, Perth and Kinross Heritage Trust, to identify opportunities to offset impacts in Killiecrankie battlefield, for example, through increased interpretation or additional research. The increased interpretation could be, for example, more signage, better signage, and in this way it would enhance the visitor's understanding of the battlefield.
Transports, you can put that away. Moving on to another discrete topic. Transport Scotland has been criticised for allegedly failing to identify the importance of the skirmish fields. Now, I appreciate your full recognition response to that at 4.15, but do you have anything to add in light of Mr. Crombie's evidence regarding the informal metal detecting survey which he undertook and the apparent munition splatter which he located in the vicinity of the skirmish fields?
As I understand it, the metal detecting metal detecting survey undertaken by Mr. Crombie was in an area out with the CPO and land made available. As I understand it as well, it was adjacent to what would most readily be interpreted as a 18th, 19th century cottage. So the context of that is important. While one piece of splatter shot, which is a musket ball that has hit something, had been identified, again, it doesn't really change the interpretation that skirmish fields 1 and 2 are less sensitive parts of the battlefield. We would tend to look for concentrations of munitions and also some other form of corroborative evidence. It also doesn't change the results of the metal detecting of skirmish field 1 and 2 undertaken in 2018, which identified, I think from memory, 1 horseshoe. So again, very little evidence for the battlefield. Moreover, it did strongly suggest, both in skirmish field 1 and skirmish field 2, a level of modern disturbance that was suggested by the nature of the material recovered, and those are detailed in the report on the results of the 2018 metal detecting that was undertaken. So from my view, it doesn't really change the cultural heritage baseline or the interpretation of impact as presented in the environmental statement.
Sir, I appreciate this is fairly lengthy examination in chief. I've now dealt with the questions which were deferred to Mr. Dempsey and points raised in the combined group of objectors' recognitions. What I would now like to do with Mr. Dempsey is refer to a number of, or 2 videos, which you would like to talk through, which I think would be helpful, and that again may take a bit of time. I wonder if...
Does it make sense to break for lunch?
It would be sensible to break now.
Perfect. Let's break for an hour until 1:45.